Welcome to our video today on Developing Leaders, our series on leadership development training. Today we're going to deal with the components, or what we've called here the parts. We want you to understand that we're going to look at the following things to give you a summary of where we're headed in our discussion today, right on the front end. First, we're going to talk about evaluating, then enlisting leaders, envisioning leaders, enriching them through edifying, educating, equipping, and then engaging them in ministry, empowering them to lead, entrusting them with opportunity, encouraging them to build them up, and establishing them. So we're going to take these one by one and go down through them to help you take a look at all the different parts that can be involved and that you can include in your leadership development process. The first one we're going to talk about is evaluating. This is an assessment process where you're going to explore through listening to them, and you're going to learn about them. In doing this, you're going to use several tools. One that you can use, and there are two websites that I think you can explore. One is placeministries.org, where we put it in our resources just below your video screen here on our website. And the second one is assessme.org. Then there are books you can use to help you evaluate and assess your potential leaders. All these books are on my website, Ministry Design Training. The link will be here for you where you can see each one of these books. The Purpose-Driven Life, What on Earth Am I Here For? By Rick Warren. Maximizing Your Effectiveness, How to Discover and Develop Your Divine Design by Aubrey Malphurs. 48 Days to the Work You Love, Preparing for the New Normal. This focus on helping people find their place in God's economy. Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Living Your Strengths, Discovering Your God-Given Talents and Inspire Your Community. Personality Type and Religious Leadership. Protege, Developing Your Next Generation of Church Leaders, and Strengths Finders 2.0. All of these are books that can help you figure out how to listen and how to learn about your people. Then the second phase of evaluating is when you are going to investigate the candidate. So you're going to interview them, and this is where the candidate is learning about your leadership development process in your ministry, and you're learning about the candidate. So it's a two-way street where you're going to interact with them and learn how things work from both their role and your role as the developer. So the trainer and the trainee. You're also going to look at inventories where you're going to figure out, you can use any number of inventories, assessment tools. Placeministries.org and assessme are two that I've mentioned. And then identifications, so that you can identify them and tell through your investigations. So you're going to interact with them through interviews. You're going to ask them to take inventories, whether they're free or paid, and then you're going to go through the trouble of identifying how they're put together in their shape. Then you've got to make an assessment. So in your evaluating, you've got to explore and investigate through listening and learning, interviewing, interacting, taking inventories, and finally identification of certain characteristics and traits about them. And I suggest that you put together your own list of traits that you're looking for as you evaluate them. But as you assess them, you are going to have two phases. One is the discovery phase, where you pull the exploration and investigation phase together and put together your findings of what you have discovered through your assessment. And secondly is the discernment phase, where you're going to look at the shape of the candidate. Rick Warren was the first that I know of to talk about looking at the shape of people. I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about an acrostic that stands for their spiritual gifts, their heart, their abilities, their personality, and their experiences. So God hardwires people in the womb. They have by nature a certain setup and how they are put together. And then that nature is nurtured during their lifetime so that they would also develop and grow into a certain way. So you can use a disc profile where you look, and a disc also is an acrostic. The D stands for dominant, then the I stands for influential, the S for steadfast, and the C for compliant. So as you look at these, you can begin to answer some questions about how you're going to design your development process when it comes to evaluating your potential leaders, your candidates for leadership. You can ask these questions. Who leads the assessment? Who is assessed? What does the assessment include? And are they in alignment, attunement, and agreement with your church's code and core values, your church's mission and vision, your strategic plan, how you're carrying out your mission, how you're executing or implementing it, and the way that you're managing, the way you're monitoring and making modifications to your strategic plan as you execute it. So as you look at this, you're going to have to discern if they are in agreement, attunement, and alignment with your ministry. This is a strong component, because if you do this wrong, and everything is building as we go through these, they're each building on the other. If you get the foundation out of place or poured poorly, and it isn't done correctly, you're going to have problems with the next component. And the next component is enlistment. And this is where you invite and recruit people. And in this, you're going to interview them and have interaction with them. You're going to intercede for them, and you're going to be praying for them. Matter of fact, every component in this, I want it to be understood that they're all bathed in prayer, and you're staying at the Lord's feet trying to figure out what his mind is on every matter so that you can do this correctly. So you evaluate them, then you're going to have to enlist them, where you are going through the process of instructing them and investing in them, and then eventually inviting them, so that you at some point you have to pull the trigger after you've evaluated them and invite them to come into your development process. And one of the biggest dangers we have is that we invite people who are either not ready to lead, not willing to lead, or not able to lead. And you want them to be ready, willing, and able. And if you get non-leaders in there, everyone's going to suffer. The other leadership candidates are going to suffer. Your leadership developers are going to suffer, and you're going to suffer. And so you want to invite only those who you're dead certain are qualified and ready and willing and able to step in and commit themselves to your leadership program. Because as you do this, you are going to recruit them, and when you do, you're going to give an invitation to potential leaders so they can discover God's place for them in his economy in your church. And you're going to take people from wherever you find them to wherever God wants them to be. So you're committing to that person that you are going to disciple them through the leadership development process so that they can reach God's full potential for their ability to lead, influence, and have impact for Christ for eternity in and through your ministry. So never forget to ask God for the next round of leaders. And some design questions that you can ask is, where do you find new leaders? When you're putting together your leadership development manual, or policy manual, or procedural manual, where do you think you're going to find new leaders? Are you going to have to go and acquire them from outside your church? Or are you going to develop from in-house? Do they apply or wait to be invited? That's a policy decision, a philosophy decision. Who will find them? I mean, is it anybody can come up? You know, in a business, you can you can offer to your employees some kind of incentive to bring potential candidates, potential employees to them, to you, and pay them. But who's going to find them? How are you going to find them? And when will you find them? And so just had some design questions to help you look at how you're going to recruit people and invite them. And you better interview them again before you have the final hiring, and interact with them and talk through the things they've learned and how they've viewed their evaluation time. And then you better pray for them, and then you've got some teaching to do about what this is going to mean and help them see further the pathway and what's going to be required of them. So it requires some investment of your life in them. And then you issue an invitation. The third component is that of envisioning. In envisioning, you want to help the candidate see the possibilities of what this is going to do for them, for their church, for their family, and for their community. How is this going to impact the cause of Christ, both locally and globally, by you as a church developing leaders, and then what the leaders are going to do and what influence and impact they're going to have. And so you want to show them by envisioning with them what could be, what should be, and what must be, in order to convince people of God's vision for your ministry and for your leadership development process. And the need for it is they not only think, well, you know, this could happen, and probably this should happen, but they must be convinced this has to happen. It must happen. And you want to show them God's vision for your ministry and for the leadership development process. What impact is it going to have? How is it going to make things better? Why and how is your church going to be different? How is it going to help you fulfill your mission? And so you want to do several things to make this happen during the envisioning process. Number one, you want to present a convincing argument to them. Number two, you want to paint a compelling picture, a portrait of what looks like. Number three, you want to produce a clear, concise statement so that you put it on a t-shirt so that people can see it and they can easily grasp it. And you help them with this so that there is no mistaking why God has called you to do these things. So you want to help them understand and see the bigger picture of what God is up to, and they're to understand that they are partnering with God, not just your church and with you, but partnering with God in the greatest cause of all. The next component is that of enriching people's lives. Now we're breaking this down, and this is kind of the umbrella over the next three components. So get that, your juices flow in your mind, and grasp this so you understand what I'm talking about. The developer has a role. As you enrich people, you are building the entire whole person, their head, their heart, and their hands, all three areas. And the leader's or developer's role is that he is listening to the potential candidate leader, the leader candidate. You are encouraging them during this time that they're in the process. You are mentoring them and coaching them and influencing them. You're dealing with conflict resolution, and you're counseling them. You are helping them through consulting and leading them and motivating them and solving problems and building trust so that they are trusting you and trusting that the way you're doing things is going to help them be built up to lead. Why are you doing this? Well, your role is to mature them and mend them where they're broken and make them better than they were when you got your hands on them. So during the enrichment time, you are helping the entire person develop so that you decide, what you want to have happen here. Well, you want them to grow and develop through your training, that you have the opportunity to learn to use several different approaches in developing the whole person, their head, their heart, and their hands. You can use a leader, a learner-driven model. And the learner-driven model is where they are self-taught, somewhat like what you're doing if you're watching this video and learning from it. And then as they are self-taught, the second model is the content-driven model, and this is where it's instructor-taught. And then the mentor-driven model, and it's hands-on coaching. And then the experience-driven model is where it's performance training and on-the-job training. And thanks to Aubrey Malphurs, he was the one where I found this information. It's very helpful. I'm sure others have said it as well. So as you're going to carry out your duties, how you're going to carry out your role as the developer, understand that you have the chance to use different methods, different models, and that you want to develop the whole person and you want to enrich their life, every part of them, not just the tasks they're going to do or just the leadership they're going to give, but you want to make certain that you're making disciples while you're developing leaders, because you don't have leaders unless you have disciples. The next component on our list is that of educating, and this is where you're going to deal with their head. You're going to fill it with teaching and instruction. So you're going to help them grow and develop through helping them learn as you teach and instruct them. You want to develop their learnability. You want to be able to evaluate during the evaluation time, and when you're investigating and exploring who they are, you want to get some measure or a read on their learnability, their ability to understand how to lead and what they're to do. So you're instructing them and you're indoctrinating them about your ministry design, and of course they should have been learning about your doctrine and theology, about your customs, about your philosophy of ministry. You're indoctrinating them so that they are coming out being one of your church family leaders. And I say that to compare it to the idea of going into, one of my sons was a Marine, and he went into boot camp and combat training, and they indoctrinated him into the culture of the Marines. He went in a Shannon and came out a Marine, and he was indoctrinated. And yes, they taught and instructed him, but they indoctrinated him in all things Marine. You want to indoctrinate them in all things your church, your ministry, your culture, your code, everything about your ministry design. You're going to lecture to them, and you're going to give them information, and you're going to have discussions with them one-on-one and in a group, and you're going to have a dialogue, not just a monologue where you're teaching, but a dialogue where you're going to discuss with them, and you're going to have the opportunity to and use approaches to education so that they can develop. And so as you do this, you have some tools that you can use. The book Protege and the book Strength-Based Leadership are two tools that you can use to help you develop your ministry design when it comes to the portion of you developing leaders for every level of your church. And as you do that, you have the opportunity to use all these different approaches to helping them learn. So think through, how do they best learn? Learn how they learn so that you can help them learn. And as you look at how they learn, then use that for each individual. And it may mean you have to invest more time one-on-one, but do it. It will pay off. And so the next component is you're going to edify them. And this is where you're nurturing their soul, their spirit, their heart, educating their head, edifying their heart. And you are going to be improving them and investing in them and nurturing them and building them and strengthening them. And you're going to use tools. The book, A Work of Heart, Understanding How God Shapes Spiritual Leaders by Reggie McNeil, is a great book for you to look at how God builds leaders and what he uses. Another tool is the video we've done in this series on the priority in developing leaders. These are tools that you can use to help you develop both your process and then use them during your process. We need to understand how people are built by God. And so as you're equipping them, you're going to be training them, and you're going to train their doability. That's what training is, their doability. You want to estimate at what level they are in their doability. how they practice, and their leadability. So can they lead others to do the task that they're given to do in your ministry? So you're going to look at their doability and their leadability, and you're going to practice with them, and they're going to practice what they're learning, so you can see how well they catch on, their learnability, so they can do and lead. And the equipping really is task-oriented. And task-oriented, you should have a target of what you're shooting for. Ephesians 4, verse 11 and 12, that the gifted ones are equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And you've got to look at what you're wanting to develop, because 13 through 18 of that text in Ephesians 4 is showing what you're trying to build them up to. So you're equipping their hearts and building this person up so that they are developed. And as you do this, you want them to be in their character, conduct, and creed in every way that you can be confident and they are competent to carry out God's calling in and through your ministry. The next component is engaging. This is where you deploy them, or you are going to enter them into the leadership role that they are going to carry and have in your ministry. So you're embarking them, perhaps for the first time, they are in an official position of leadership. And you're going to enter them into this. Some you'll have to take them by the hand. Others you'll have to take them by the elbow or the arm. Some you'll just kind of push them along on their back with your hand, so to speak. All different levels of leading them into it, so that you look at that. Here you are employing this person as a volunteer or a paid person under your tutelage, that now they are engaged in ministry. So they're stepping into the water for the first time, or riding that bike for the very first time, or driving that car for the very first time. And while you're there with them and beside them to help them, they're there to perform, and everybody knows that they're being put into a place of leadership, and they've been under a development time to get there. So you're going to deploy them into the work. So you're going to place them into service. This involves placing the right people into the right place at the right time. So let me ask you some questions here, things that you need to decide. Who do you launch into service? Well, you launch into service those who have gone through the discovery and development stage. And what level do you put them in? Well, you put them in levels where you have created. So you need to evaluate as they are developing. And just because the evaluation, I put it at the front part of the process, it's at every part of as a component all the way through this. You are evaluating them. So what level do you put them in? And by level, I mean what category of ministry. And you need to stop and evaluate, are they able to oversee what kind of ministry, what kind of people, what kind of task, and you need to match them up. So you need to think through not only who you're launching into ministry, but at what level are you going to put them. Part of your evaluation is to look at the level of their leadership, and we deal with this in the pathways that you can look at, understanding what levels of leadership you're going to develop so they know what they are and where they are. So you've got to answer this and decide what level do you put them in, and who launches the leader. Is it you doing everything, or do you have leaders under you who are doing that at every level of leadership? Who launches the leaders? And where do you put them? You want to locate the right ministry for each leaders, for every leader. We go from here to dealing with empowering them. And let's talk about the idea of authorizing people. That's what empowering them. You're going to give them responsibility. So you're going to authorize them to lead. And so you're going to give them your approval and the approval of the church. And you're going to enable them. So as you launch them into ministry, you've got to empower them through authorizing them and approving them and enabling them to lead. So their authority needs to equal their responsibility. So here are some definitions. The first one is given by Aubrey Malphurs in his book, Building Leaders. And he says that empowerment is about the authority to make decisions. It is the transfer of authority and duties to an emerging leader from an established leader. In church, this is a spiritual transfer whereby the emerging leader has been accepted as worthy and capable to take on new authority and new duties. So the intentional transfer of authority to an emerging leader within specified boundaries from an established leader who maintains responsibility for the ministry. So intentional means deliberate and planned ahead with prayer and forethought. It is the giving away of ministry to another person with the authority and responsibility to do the job. So there are some questions to help you sort out this idea of empowering them, because you've got to decide this for yourself. I'm not going to be there with you as you do this week in and week out. You've got to decide for yourself what God is thinking about this. And two questions to help you sort it out is which ministries require your direct attention and which ones don't. So when you put somebody in and empower them, are you going to have to stand beside them the whole time while they do it? Or are you going to be able to back away and kind of step out of sight? The second question is, how will the transfer of authority take place? You got these and other questions that you need to decide as you design your leadership development process. There are then problems that come with empowering people, with transferring power. First off, you have unprepared emerging leaders. They're just not ready yet, and you need to be able to identify that, to assess that. Secondly is intentional or unintentional power grabs, and that's where an emerging leader that you're putting into leadership, or that you're moving an existing leader to another, or moving him up a level in your ministry design and how they're leading and giving them more responsibility, they may become very hungry for power. And so in this, you've got to deal with it, because they may want the position for the wrong reasons, and they may want the power with the position for the wrong reasons. And so there are a couple of distinctions that we make when you transfer people into authority, into leadership. First is, a duty is a task. A responsibility is the risk for taking the duty. You can give a person a task without giving him the responsibility for that task. So as you talk through how you're going to design this, make certain that you give clear difference or distinction between what a duty is and what responsibility is. Then how well do you know your leaders? Failure to intimately know and understand the people that you seek to develop and lead. Can you answer the following questions about them? And these are not original with me. I think it was Aubrey Malphurs who wrote them, but I might have got them from somewhere else. And here they are. What are the key details of my colleague's heritage? What communicates importance and concern for him? What is his personality or temperament type? What are his current practices with spiritual disciplines? Who has influenced his life and how? What books or literature has impacted his life and how? What are his areas of disappointment? What are his areas of joy? What does he aspire to become or to do? What are his fears and why? What are his primary temptations in life? What is his history with the church and his history with his family? Is your failure to walk in close intimacy with others a reflection of your own failure to do so with God? And so how well do you know your leaders? I've just given you some suggested questions that you can take and make a part of making certain that you have evaluated that person correctly, so that when you empower them and trust them with authority, that you understand what that means and they understand what it means. Don't put people into leadership too quickly, but also don't expect such a level of performance or excellence, because most of us, we're just average Joes. And you may never launch a person into leadership if you don't monitor yourself correctly with what your expectations are. And then there is the role or opportunity, the component of entrusting them. When you entrust a person, you are respecting them, and it says that you have confidence in them. You feel that they are competent. You believe they are reliable, meaning they are dependable. And in doing this, you believe that they are responsible, and therefore they are trustworthy. And so one of the components of this is that you are empowering them and also entrusting them. You are communicating to them as a component of your leadership development procedures that you respect them, you believe they are reliable and responsible. They are trustworthy, dependable, and competent, and that you have confidence in them. The next component is that of encouraging. When you encourage someone, you might be refining them where you're wanting them to improve and to continue to grow and develop, because as your ministry grows, what if the ministry outgrows their bandwidth and they don't have the capacity or capability to keep up? You want to continue to educate them, develop them, edify them, and equip them so that your ministry can go forward, because the leadership development process, in my thinking, in its design, is supposed to propel your church from level to level in every way, spiritually, numerically, in every way. It is being refined and growing. Well, you want to continue to encourage them through refining them. They have value. Continue to invest in them. You may refresh them in their spirit. They may be weary and worn out. You're going to revitalize them and maybe at times restore them. A broken bone, you're mending them, but you're restoring them. And you're going to renew them. And you're going to reassure them of God's calling on their life and their place in your ministry, because they're going to have failures. And they're going to be worn out mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And you're going to have to revitalize and restore them, renew them, and reassure them that they are right in the middle of God's calling on their life, that God is up to something good in their life, and He's doing it for His glory and their good. And you're going to have to reinforce them. And so you're going to have to strengthen them and support them through this. And you want to honor and encourage your people. And so as you do this, that you are encouraging them through recognizing and rewarding them for a job well done. And this is a wonderful thing that you can do to encourage them, is to recognize them. And so as you recognize them and you reward them, you have some design questions to ask about this. Who will recognize and reward your leaders? How will you recognize and reward them? Where will you recognize and reward them? Is it going to be in front of their ministry they're overseeing, in front of the whole congregation, in front of your board or elders or deacons or trustees or stewards, the whole group of ministry leaders? When will you recognize and reward them? What will you recognize and reward in your leaders? What you reward is what you'll probably repeat and reproduce in the lives of your leaders that are being developed. And so realize you're developing a culture of leadership development. So be careful what you recognize and reward. Why will you recognize and reward? Use it as a teachable moment. And how often are you going to recognize and reward your leaders? This is all a part of encouraging them, refining and refreshing, revitalizing, restoring, renewing, reassuring, reinforcing, and recognizing them. All is a part of encouraging them as a component, a key component to people as they have been carrying out for some time ministry for and in your ministry, in your church. And the last point is that you're going to establish them. They are going to have time where they are able to be stabilized. You're going to stabilize them, set them up, steady them, settle them, secure them. There's substantiating their role in what you're doing, and you're strengthening them. Now, when you do this, you are going to have to give time where this person has been immersed in his role, in his position of leadership, so that you have opportunity to monitor them. So your process, you're going to monitor several things. You're going to determine the performance of the process and the people that are serving. So never stop evaluating and working to improve both your leaders, your process, and the place that they are serving. Then you want to examine the process and the product. So as you're going through this, you're continuing to establish them and build them. You never stop investing in your leaders so that they can take your ministry further and further and accomplish more for Christ, reach more people, build more people up, make disciples, and make leaders. And so that you can continue to go forward, and as you have a global vision for what God is going to do in and through your church ministry, you continue to do this. Well, as you go through this, you also have to, in monitoring, you're going to have to make some modifications where you assess and appraise and then make adjustments and adapt your ministry. And this is all happening to the people, the process, and the place that you are having them serve. So some design questions I would give to you here as we close is, what will you evaluate? How often will you evaluate them as they're established? How will you evaluate them as they are established? Who will do the evaluation ongoing as you're monitoring their leadership and their productivity? And what will you do with the evaluations? This is a continual process where you as a leader have to develop a machine or a process where God is at the center of it, always bathing in prayer, so that you're always taking it before the Lord and determining his mind on every matter. But this is a key component in having a perpetual culture or process that continues to develop leaders that will develop other leaders, that will develop other leaders, that will in turn develop other leaders. And so you're carrying out something that you can develop something in your small, medium, or large, or mega church that will perpetuate generations to come of people who are taught how to lead, why to lead, where to lead, when to lead, why to lead, who to lead, and how to lead. Well, I'm Marshall Shannon, a ministry design coach with Ministry Design Training and Concepts, and you can reach me at this email address or either one of these phone numbers, and we'll be happy to engage with you to assist you with developing your leadership training process.